Ladies and gentlemen, hello, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun, and I'm here with a review for Gauntlet on PC. For those of you who are familiar with the Gauntlet series, you are probably like me and greatly anticipating the release of Gauntlet here on computer. It's priced at about $20 on Steam. Gauntlet is a dungeon crawler game for 1 to 4 players cooperatively done in an isometric style. Now, Gauntlet opens up with a little introductory tutorial showcasing its 4 characters. You can choose between the warrior, elf, wizard, and Valkyrie. Each character has their own unique playstyle and abilities. They all have 4 skills to use, except the wizard, who has a unique Magicka-style rune choice system that gives him up to 9 spells to pick from. If handing out twice as many abilities as the other characters doesn't tip you off, he may be the most challenging to play, but the wizard is absolutely overpowered. 3 of the 4 characters follow a similar pattern. 3 out of 4 abilities have no cooldown, and their strongest move is shown in a box at the bottom, highlighting whether or not it's currently available. The wizard has every unique ability on its own individual cooldown, making it a tad bit frustrating to tell when the next skill is available, but with so many spells to choose from, you can just hop between them and rotate the things that are currently available anyways. Okay, starting with the warrior, he has a basic sideswipe attack, a heavy overhead smash that deals significant damage, a charged up rush ability that's useful for plowing through enemies, and his best skill is definitely his whirlwind attack that cleaves through enemies in a large circle and ends with a swipe in front of him. It devastates most enemies in a single hit. The Valkyrie has a directional shield block, a dash attack that thrusts forward but starts up a little bit slow, a standard sword cleave swing, and her best ability is her shield throw, which temporarily removes her crappy block ability and bounces around, potentially striking enemies up to 2 times as it returns in a boomerang fashion. The elf has a standard fast arrow attack that shoots at a medium range, a charged up long-range better arrow shot, and a roll that lets him dodge through enemies and is great for repositioning. His best skill is a bomb that can be dropped and explodes in a huge radius, or you can strap it to his long-range shot to stick it to a target further away. The wizard, on the other hand, well, what can't he do? He has a flame teleport that strikes and usually one-shots all enemies it touches in a line. He has a frost beam that grows in strength the longer you cast it, but unfortunately roots him in place. He has an ice blast that freezes enemies in a cone near him, a standard spammable fireball that hits harder than the attack of all the other characters. Then you can switch over and use chain lightning or a massive fireball lob to take down large groups of enemies at the same time, while you slow them in your time warp field. Or, best of all, considering the unlimited enemy spawning style that Gauntlet has, is his shield. He can cast a bubble that protects you from almost all standard enemies and their attacks, and repels or one-shots weaker enemy. The key to victory is dropping this beside an enemy spawn and firing on it until it dies. Once this bubble fades, you just use your fireball teleport to get away safely, rinse and repeat until everything on the map is clear. The controls for all characters are fairly intuitive and easy to get used to. I would highly suggest playing with a controller, as the game was clearly designed with one in mind. Sometimes the auto-aim can get a little bit annoying and will fire about 180 degrees away from where you're actually aiming, so expect a few hazardous shots to blast off in the middle of the fight. For the most part, everything reacts the way you would expect. Through my playthrough of the game, I encountered very few bugs, and there was a couple of times I had to restart a level because a gate wouldn't open even after I killed all the enemies in the area, and once I had a guy get stuck half in a wall and become invincible. But for the most part, from a day 1 launch, the portions of the game I experienced were relatively problem-free. Okay, let's talk about level design a little bit. So Gauntlet is broken into sections, and it's really difficult to describe without getting super confusing, but I'm going to give it a shot anyways. There are 3 sections to the game. Each one has a unique enemy and visual style. The first section is the Crypts of the Sun King, which is mostly filled with mummies and skeletons, and it looks like a very generic tomb, crypty, dungeon type thing. The second is the Caverns of Magash, or Mogas, or however you pronounce that. They've got orcs and spiders and are pretty much just caves that are irritatingly dark. The third is the Temple Burning of Dur, and if you haven't guessed yet, it's mostly a dirt temple filled with lava around you and featuring a lot of fire-based enemies and imps with a little more health than you're regularly used to, because it's the final portion of the game. Okay, so each of these sections is also broken into 4 levels. The 4th is always the area boss, and the first 3 are usually ridiculously identical. Each level is then broken into 3 parts. The first level is a standard dungeon crawl. The second is still a dungeon crawl, but has something extra special added to it. For example, the first level has Death chase you the entire time, and if he catches you, he one-shots you. Other than that, it's basically the same as the first part of the level. And the third is usually a small map that just forces you to clear the enemies wave by wave style. So there you have it, 3 sections, 4 levels, and 3 parts to each level. Do the math, and that's something like 30 areas you're going to explore. I've beaten the entire game on hard and played a couple of levels on all the other difficulties, and I'd say once you're comfortable with the game, you can probably progress through it and finish it in about 5 or 6 hours. Your first time through may take double or more, depending on how much you struggle. The game also has 4 difficulties to choose from, and the top 2 are actually quite a challenge. For the sake of the review, most of the footage you're seeing is the game set to the hard difficulty, which is the second most challenging. Okay, so on the easier difficulties of the game, it feels more like the older style Gauntlet games. A simple smash through, no big challenge, and it's great for non-competitive party-style fun type of game. The harder difficulties are going to provide you with a serious challenge if you want to play solo or with friends. I got one of my coworkers to play the first few levels with me, and we really struggled through them. Sharing lives means you're only as strong as your weakest link, but if your party goes down, the sole survivor can get you more tokens to resurrect your friends after he kills enough enemies. For anybody who wants some tips, the wizard is easily the best character to walk through the game with, but the elf is also a very viable candidate who I was able to complete some levels on unfair with. Unfair is the hardest difficulty in the game for those unaware. The Valkyrie felt utterly worthless, and I was not able to figure out a strategy that made her make any progress on any of the harder difficulties at all. And the warrior, while it was possible to win, it took about 10 times longer to clear the rooms than the wizard and the elf. Speaking of older style Gauntlet, I grew up on games like Dark Legacy and Legends, and I feel it should be mentioned that despite a few enemies popping up from them, this game feels like an entirely different series. If you've ever played a game called Forced, I'd say that's got a closer feel to this than any of the previous Gauntlet games. Before, you used to need to use your keys to open chests for a chance at a fun random power-up or maybe some food or gold. Now the only thing keys are used for is opening large sets of doors, and the food and gold is always sitting on a table or in a jar. Potions used to be items you could use to abuse and clear out large waves of enemies, but now they are more of like a currency that you use to activate your trinkets. Trinkets are the only thing you spend your gold on, as there are no longer any stats or alternative items to purchase. A lot of fun perks like anti-death, the chicken, rapid fire, all of those things are completely gone from the game, and I suppose could be considered to be replaced with trinkets, but because of the lack of potions in the game, you're not going to really be using your trinkets all that often. Gauntlet also has no leveling up. The only leveling you do is from achievements you slowly progress towards that reward you with pitiful small changes like a 10% increase in damage or a 10% decrease in damage taken. Many of these are also given to you for dying, which feels very counterproductive. Having multiple different die to X achievements to lower incoming damage doesn't really deliver the fun progression feeling that most game advancement seems to have. The way it's currently set up, it feels like you should start the game off by suiciding over and over so you can gain the benefits for future levels. Okay, maybe having one haha you died perk, but there's seriously like 8 separate things you need to die to multiple times if you want to attain all the damage reduction possible. The game also went for a humor style that unfortunately I feel really missed the mark. I didn't find the so-called jokes all that funny, but instead they felt really forced. The story is about as horrible as you can possibly write, which isn't really such a bad thing because the game is about 99% built around the action anyways. You're supposed to clear the rooms and progress through the game. That's pretty much all you need to know. The boss fights, however, weren't disappointing at all. They were pretty well designed and definitely provided a decent challenge. I never got stuck on them for too long, as once you figure out the pattern, they're pretty easy, but if you up the difficulty and add additional players, it's going to be an uphill challenge taking them down. Now, as far as the individual levels, they start to get a little bit grating and repetitive, but then you move on to the next area and it's just fresh enough to keep it enjoyable until the very end. Now, I won't spoil the ending, but I will say it was probably the worst ending to a game I've ever seen. It was absolutely horrendous. Anakin Skywalker's descent into whiny preteen madness was actually a better story. Overall, I definitely think the game is worth a buy. If you have some friends to play with, it's going to be an absolute blast. And if you're already on board with Gauntlet and you're looking for more games in this style, I also suggest checking out another game called Forced, which is available on Steam. For those of you who are looking for the old style Gauntlet games and poured hundreds of hours into it, unfortunately, I think you're going to find this game disappoints you a little bit. Now, the game is great, but it's changed significantly from its roots. I was a little bit disappointed to see the achievement style triumph over the levels because it removed a little bit of the reason to grind through the older levels, extending the enjoyment of the gameplay. I remember killing the Chimera like 40 times and loving every minute of it on the older Gauntlets, but without the experience reward, I can't say battling bosses more than a handful of times before it becomes just a really boring, repetitive process. Also, the levels don't really have any hidden requirements or golden feathers or anything you need to unlock so you can progress to the future levels. There are hidden rooms, but even if you skip every single one of them the entire game, you won't feel like you're missing out on much. It's missing some of the charm that the older Gauntlet games had, and it's significantly shorter, but it's priced quite low, so you're getting a fun indie-style game over a polished AAA title. But for 20 bucks, you can't go wrong. The game's a ton of fun and definitely worth checking out. For me, I pity whoever gets stuck on the Valkyrie. You're just gonna have to shield block while your friends have all the fun. Again, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun. Thanks for checking out my Gauntlet review. Hope you guys have some fun. If you have anything to say, please drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow on Twitter. See you guys next time.